You're safer here than anyplace else.
It's doing, kind of like in a sense of redundancy, but it's like ontological redundancy, that it's always containing itself within what it's doing, and within what it's doing, its being is being preserved. Okay, simple enough concept. If I can draw it out, the idea is, so you have, oh man, the mouse is too fast. I wonder if I could slow that down somehow. Okay, I think I fixed that. What am I doing? Okay, so the idea is you feel emotions at a given time. I haven't used this system too much. I really don't know how to explain this. I do, but it gets weird every time I try. It's a concept that has been mentioned before. The idea is, so we have different states of emotionality, and you could even use a circle thing, geometry. Now it's getting really special. So it goes from the center. Sorry, better software. Would technically be something like that. Where you have this would be the highest form of emotion. It's like beyond positive and negative. It's kind of beyond it all, if you will. And so, as well, the emotions have a kind of vector element. It's as if they lean in a certain direction and initiate change, or kind of a transition of mind or self or whatever it is, as if self is moving through a space. The more we feel emotions that are towards the totality of everything that we're experiencing, which you can kind of see like this is like a it's an air gap, if you will. And this is, you know, everything that we experience. It's a bulk of experience, but we get it more or less day by day. So it has to break up. It has to have the segmented aspect. It has to be able to do that. Otherwise, we won't be able to conceive it, or we won't be able to. The experience is based upon that. And so it's just the defining features. As well, it's part of how we exist anyway, because the whole thing is it's like a time clock functionality, like computer program that's explaining what it's doing, kind of like in not a sense of redundancy, but it's like ontological redundancy, that it's always containing itself within what it's doing, and within what it's doing, its being is being preserved or recreated, like a feedback loop. And so we have the bulk of our emotionality. You could see that as if, you know, everything that we've ever experienced being represented here. Sorry if you can hear the noise outside. And so then you could say we have these layers to the emotionality, and in that sense there has to be some type of difference between the two states. You can see this is the default rest state. I shouldn't be writing on there. I can type it. Where without any kind of soul, will, this isn't the best to write on, without any effort, it basically it'll go up and down, it'll be up and down, but eventually it'll just go to a rest state where it's at the lowest possible static capacity, which is more or less kind of like a chaos. It would be being emotionality for the sense of existing, and in the sense being at the mercy of the environment. And if you're in a perfectly controlled environment, that's fine, but in a so-called natural environment, that's basically impossible. You would become part of the chaos of the system, which for human consciousness is rough. For less than human consciousness, it is part of the natural backdrop, if you will. And in other terms, to try and boost the native consciousness, or the natural consciousness, here, the animal consciousness, into perceiving something that would require a lot of basically time, refinement, to achieve that level of equilibrium where eventually you could have the experience of seeing it all by developing conscious mind or higher mind, and then eventually the kind of intellectual processes that enable us to conceptualize that which we can't directly see through intellect and so on. But it's tied to the emotions, and so I'm describing here some type of emotionality time-space vehicle. Whereas what if instead of where we are in, like the ground, sorry for my drawing, maybe it's a bush and then a bench. I don't know if that's gonna work. Okay. In this place, and then stuff happens here, and then we have emotions. And it's like, well, this caused the change in that. So what if in actuality, when you change your emotionality through will, you change your space within a higher space? And what if all the possible outcomes of that experience are on a kind of time-space grid, a template? Simply conceptualizing this simply means it's a template, and we're drawing out a template of what could be, kind of like you can draw out a template of all the possible positions a bowling ball can have, or that can take when it's impacting the pins from different positions. And of course that's a lot of possibilities, but it's pretty much the same as far as your emotions. And again, now it's not like, well, what if I fell this way or feel this way and then this happened and now everything's upside down and I can fly through space? Like, that doesn't happen. You're not going to have the emotion that then changes physics and now this dream turns into that. It happens in your dreams. In this format, there's like a limiting process that makes sure everything has to kind of like go through a filtration matrix where whatever you're adding to this group experience, or at least what experienced as a group experience, has to filter through the potentiality of the group interaction. So if you could boost a world up and have a different dream experience that would be that far different, you'd have to be the individual whose consciousness could be powerful enough to exert that on those in your environment. In other words, if they started to flip out or see something different or exert their power on it, your sense of control and emotionality would have to be greater than theirs in order to exert your influence over the group communal experience of this conscious realm. And hypothetical interactive dynamics that I'm kind of outlining here, although we all kind of know this. And it's fact, because we say, well, time flies, but that's an illusion because we're bending the perception. So my theory I'm putting out is saying, well, what if it's flipped and we think it's the perception that's being bent by space-time, but what if it's our perception bending time-space? And we all heard this before, but the idea is that dynamic isn't misunderstood. Yeah, stuff happens and it changes us, and we go on this feedback loop of changing and so on. But what if it's the other way around? And imagine then if it was, it's a ball rolling downhill and you got to get in front of it and get in front of the emotional reaction or whatever it is and stop it or control it or make it what it's supposed to be to you in this view, which is what's actually going on, meaning you have the choice, if you will. The delete doesn't work too well on this app. Or you have the choice, and the whole thing of this is a kind of test because it's your emotions. If you say something happened and led it to an environment and a space-time experience that translated into time-space experiences, aka future events that you didn't intend or wanted, but it was based upon, and it can't go anywhere other than what you feel. If it's truly, like, we figured out that it's based upon, I think this app or this software froze, I think, then it's basically proof, and we can't deny it. But proving it, one could only prove it to themselves. So the erase takes like 4 minutes at a time. And it doesn't make or break the experience. Your lack of understanding of that possibility, that dynamic, the intellectual requirements, how to function in such an environment, which is a hyperspatial environment, because you're dealing with in space-time experience is how your body functions and reacts. And in that overlay, if you react or if you respond and choose and insert your will in that minute reactive, spark from your sympathetic nervous system and so on into changing how the outcome is, then it's not happening to you based upon the dynamic, the theory that it's happening to us and our perception bends, and then we change our view of reality and we think reality changes, it's actually the other way around at that point, because you're choosing it to be, you're making it be that way. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to change the physics of atoms in your desk or something like that, but every single atom, every single physical experience and layer of that is changed because your mind is changed, and you are now operating on a different level, where now it's more secure, there's less noise, there's less unpredictability, you can more securely interact in a way that's going to bring about an outcome where you can choose where you want to go in this kind of hyperspatial model matrix or matrix model, where each of these possibilities is either leading towards a highest sense of self-awareness, in which case your emotions are secondary to your intellect, or it's the other way around, in which case your intellect is hindered by your emotions. And in that sense, the reality cannot change. If it proves, and it's like push the button is pushed, you feel it, and then you react with the emotion, you can't then go and say, but I don't want the intended, or the resulting change as my, how one would experience a hyperspatial, shift in the possibilities of what would be a interdimensional matrix if we could map it out with powerful supercomputers and CERN devices and thousands of millions of people hooked together in a cloud computing hyperbrain experiment. You would just get dimmer. In galactic, whatever you want to call it, the atoms would lose density. You could, put yourself in a machine and find a spin or tachyon or whatever it is. I don't have an idea, but I know how it works. And you would see it would look like you have less time or less charge. Entropy would be more induced. It would seem as if something was happening on a cellular, but because of a subcellular or a subphysical interaction, and that would be represented by some aspect of your energy that's also contained in basically like a quantum server, like extra physical or super physical server system, in which you would call a galactic view. Some aspect of your essence in that is moving away from equilibrium within that system, and so then your mind would more or less slightly degrade and so on, and your life would have less potential, stuff like that. It's not like you're going to glow red when you're like ready to wake up, and then you dim down and turn blue when you're going to sleep or something like that. I mean, I'm sure you do, but it's invisible. The whole point about what's happening is that what's happening there is invisible to what's happening here. That's the whole point. They're at an inverse. And then what happens there, if it comes here, well, that's the miracle, because you're creating something here based upon an invisible world or just a virtual world of feeling. So if it's not controlled and something comes from here, then it's not going to necessarily be predictable in the sense that it's just another walk in the park, or it's just going to bake bread. Not controlled interactions involving the placing of resources into an oven to produce something like a time-space, equilibrium reality generator, your soul, your life, without the intent of what you're creating, doesn't make like brownies one day or blueberry muffins the next day. It just makes a pile of steaming, burning crap that you can't do anything with and you have to throw out. The refinement. Now down here, you can do whatever you want. You just go out, roll around, have fun. It's the same level of response. To get to that high level, it's such a high level of refinement that the variables, the possibilities have to be ran through over and over like an algorithm until all the, not kinks, but all the errors and glitches in our perception are worked out. That way we can actively use the system and utilize it to creatively, constructively interact in a way that benefits and increases self-awareness, which is, if you can do that, you have a button that does that, you're literally light years ahead, which is what we have, but we're not using it. We're using it to beat each other in the face and graffiti. But that's coming to an end, because then that now is being pointed towards the right direction, to the point where that's just going to cause more awakening, and then it cannot result in anything but more awakening, unless one applies all of their energy towards going to sleep, in which case they can't complain. And so the idea is, you're actually, according to this, see, I might have to get a new page. Okay, I think that was fast. So then instead of being like in physical space, going somewhere and getting to different levels of emotionality, depending on that, you're actually in a space where there's nothing but you and these floating bands of frequencies of emotion seeds and consciousness. Where you go in this space determines the 3-dimensional perspective you have and on some type of larger grid of reality that we can't see, just like we're in a video game server system and you go to different channels depending on how your intelligence rises or falls. And intelligence is a form of self-awareness as well, not just informational awareness or the ability to repeat information or variables and remember variables. It has to be the ability to deconstruct that and then rebuild it without the same context. And as well, the will to do it. It's like you got to do it, but then you got to go to bed, and then we kick your door down, flip you off the bed, hose you down, throw you in the field, get you to work or do PT or whatever it is, and then you come take the test. What kind of test is that? Well, that's what you're in right now. You just got thrown through a womb, slapped around by whatever you want to call it. Now you're waking up, and you got to take the test. So that's the idea of how it works. It's an absolute will. It's a test of will as well as all these other things, and each one is doubling because it's like a mirage for another. Where you think you got the will done, you're done with the test of will. The intellect comes in. Where you think you got the intellect, the emotion comes in. So you have to do it all at once, and it's actually a drawing together instead of a seeking at one thing and then moving to the next, the next, the next. It's a drawing together just to do what you're doing, which is being you, and so on. And so it's not actually a thing. It's something innate that we all know how to do, but if we think about how we're going to do it, it cuts that part off because it's not that part of the brain. Inherently, it's the opposite part of the brain. And so what we think of as moving through that space, wherever we're going, we're actually in some kind of reality tree system, and it's frequency based, and it's like an interdimensional network of consciousness. And where you go in there, and it's not like a regular system. It's like it's glowing or something, or it's got like veins or something. But it's the same geometry of the architecture that we see that makes the physical world. It's just a hyper version of that. It's every world in one unison. And how do you shift between them like you're in a virtual system? They're multiplexed as frequencies, or in a processing system, or in a cable. It's in the air. It's in magnetism. It's in your consciousness. But in that sense, that map of how that shows up as your brain is just how their brain and can show what your body looks like, and your body and brain together, you can see what kind of environment that fits into. Well, our soul level of awareness describes our understanding of this place. And when you max it out, you can see the whole thing. And that's also the other point. I was going to make a post on that, but you have to have the experience to max out. That's a brain, if you can't tell. To max out your brain, to give your brain enough experience, enough detail, so that, say you were to then take this image, cross-reference, and see where that could fit into this universe, of the whole universe, you have to have enough symmetry, reflective, proportional, geometric, scalar symmetry of the whole image that's complex enough to each equal 9 layers of consecutive exponential increase in variation, that your brain can then scalar dimensionally map out the entire universe, and you're capable of staying awake. If not, it doesn't mean, it just means you go to sleep. That brain goes to sleep. It can't see the whole light. It can't see all the stuff going on. It's not just going to, it's not going to put sunglasses on. It's going to go to sleep. Sunglasses would be an artificial system that you place over, like a lensing system that you would use in a physical space from lower to look in, kind of like the computer systems and so on. And that'll work, but then it'll work temporarily. And if you wear glasses too much, you hurt your mitochondria and so on. A little bit of metaphors using artificial technology to see in the dark. So the idea is that we're in this tree system floating around, up and down and around, but we're going upwards. And so with that, you can kind of see we can go up and down, and you can have your emotion. But to go down and be away from self-awareness would be like to wake up and to be feeling one way about yourself, and then to literally later that day or the next day to then feel less aware in a way. That's a stupid explanation. It would be like waking up, going from 15 to 20 to 25, and then being 15 again. It doesn't happen, and it would be a complete opposite of everything that is in existence. Everything moves, everything's going, there's no grind. So the point wouldn't be to just like float around and go up. It's like we're shooting up towards a vector, or it has its own shape, geometry, and kind of like charge articulation based upon you, like you're a magnetic dialing vector system, or magnetic dial in charge for a vector system that we represent in our energy, the shape and geometry we're in, or the universe as a whole represents. And so when you go towards that pinnacle of self-awareness, the whole universe flies forward with you. The whole thing shoots forward. It's like a vector system. It leans. You can't fall down a hill without moving. And so we're in time, we're in consciousness, and emotionality is a kind of measurement. It's the grit. It's like the sandpaper or the lines on the road that tell you where you're going. And so it's always going forward. And then when you go forward, you don't just stay the same. You don't have the same views and feel the same. You change more than the world changes around you. You change exponentially. And so the whole thing is about movement, or in that sense, the illusion of such, because it's your perception in that you're simply changing yourself and experiencing the effect of motion or change around you. And again, it's a dynamic. If it weren't, somebody would come here and just be like, oh, well, I want everything to be this way. And now chocolate runs through, the streets or something like that. And it rains mustard. It wouldn't. He'd have to override, or she would have to overwrite every other brain in here, just like quantum computing and a blockchain. You'd have to literally hack everything at a single time and rewrite history from your perspective in order to get it, which is also part of what happened. But you'd have to do it from your mind instead of, breaking the system and hacking it, which is the point. You can hack it if you want to, but then you're going to get those outcomes. A single mind shouldn't have the power to do that, and naturally, normally doesn't. And therefore, everything's in an equilibrium, a kind of articulate, balanced dynamic between being influenced by this world and influencing it. Ultimately, though, you are influencing it because you are part of the thing that makes people think, or the think that makes people think. And that is, in a way, the only thing that's there. It's not before the world, it is the world pretending, in a way, or it made the world through dream and consciousness and solidifying it, which is the easiest thing. If you can dream enough, now that dream keeps happening. It's like a recurring dream and it becomes part of your life. Well, it's the same thing. Only if you have time, space, whatever, this fluid or something we're in, it solidifies into these segmented realities or layered realities. And we go through them kind of like dreams are dreaming, but that's not the point, because the point is that there is a point. There's a point up here and there's a point down here. You start, I know where that happens. You go and you don't know where that happens. It goes forever, and you achieve higher and higher levels of consciousness and self-awareness. Okay, thank you.